A game before being released goes through multiple iterations of itself until settling on a finished product, being relatively incomplete in any date before completion or completely different. These betas are usually so interesting because they feel both familiar and different enough to awaken our interest in learning about them. Well, the same is the case for Sonic games, and today we'll be taking a look at the betas, prototypes, trailers, concept art and some other promotional material for Sonic Adventure 2. This video is a follow-up to my SA2 cut content video, and the second part of a 3-part video about this game's development. It's also the last video of the remake project I'm making of these 5 videos, and I recommend checking them all out. Even though you can watch these videos by any order you want, I also recommend watching the cut content video, as I'll be avoiding covering any cut or unused content present both in the final versions and the prototypes to avoid repetition where it isn't necessary. I want to personally thank Peeps Highway once again, who has documented most of what I'll be covering extensively, as well as helping me out with whatever I needed, so make sure to check them out. I also want to thank all modders and researchers and data miners and everyone that has made this possible. So let's take a look at them. Sonic Adventure 2, much like the other early 3D Sonic games, has a bunch of documentation regarding its development, especially when we consider prototypes that have been found and dumped online, having a total of 6. And as you may be aware, SA2 has 3 distinct versions: the Dreamcast release, SA2 Battle and the 2012 re-release. Since the latter doesn't have any prototypes, just a trial version that's not that interesting, we won't really be talking about it much today. Anyways, let's start by looking at some prototypes of the Dreamcast version, starting by the Trial. Sonic Adventure 2 The Trial is a demo of SA2 that was bundled with Phantasy Star Online, 6 months before SA2's release. Only the opening cutscene of the hero story and City Escape are playable. It was built on the 28th of November 2000 and dumped by DRX on August 31st, 2008. The fact that this demo was bundled with PSO is interesting in the sense that the debug menu seen in the final Dreamcast version has a background with a clear screenshot of that game, as well as some other drawn-in text. Firstly, the title screen looks completely different from the final. One of the more obvious differences is the logo, as even though it contains most of the same characteristics, it has less colors and a different style. The background also contains the same elements, but the Sonic and Shadow artwork is different, as well as just having a black backdrop, different blend modes and no gradient at all. While the Sonic artwork is barely visible, it's based on an alternate version of his portrait that isn't wearing the soap shoes. In fact, the most obvious and glaring difference between this version and the final is the lack of the soap shoes, as it was made before the deal between them and Sega was sealed, so Sonic just uses his regular shoes. A stripped down version of 2-player mode is present in the demo, although it can't be activated through normal means and will crash after completing a level. Since that's the case, the mode is also missing several features, such as a functioning split screen, the best of 1 modes, and the light shoes upgrade for Sonic. Also, Sonic Wind has a different name and animation in this demo. Here it's called Long Range Homing, and contains a swirl of bright colors in comparison to the blue swirl of the final. Even if this demo only has 1 cutscene, it contains a few changes from the final version. Obviously, Sonic is wearing different shoes, which can be seen in the final, although they eventually get switched. In the final, music starts playing lightly in the background while the gun pilot communicates with the radio tower, and changes to a more exciting part of the song when Sonic busts out of the helicopter. In the demo, no music plays as an intro. The delivery of Sonic's lines is also different. His second line is also a little different, but means the same thing. A notable difference of this demo is at the part where the gun soldier says "No!" In the final, he just says "What?" But this was translated as "what the hell." It was clearly decided that Sonic games shouldn't have curse words. Little did they know. Seeing as this demo is only a sliver of the final, there are bound to be unused graphics. Most of these are either used in the final or present there, but also unused. These include a city escape map, various icons from other stages not present in the demo, the random ring icon, and the graphics that are displayed on the bottom of each player's screen during 2-player modes. Other textures include the Mystic Melody door, the hint computer of the treasure hunting stages, and the textures for an upgrade point. Even so, the life icon for the other characters differs from the final, being eventually re-rendered. Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails look more akin to SA1, while Shadows, Rouges, and Eggman's were taken at a different angle. A number of textures in this version of City Escape are different to the ones seen in the final game. The largest add is for Phantasy Star Online in the demo, being replaced with Chow in Space 2. The name Nino's Pizza was changed to Pizza Sonic 2. This add for the pixel noise was completely removed in the final and replaced with the soap shoes. The Chow in Space Collector's Edition ad has its coming on DVD text changed to coming to your home, and 2 signs had their textures made brighter. The early level and boss list is also present here, but does feature a few differences from the one left over in the final, such as Wild Canyon missing the 2p suffix, Weapons Bed 2p containing the 2p suffix, Egg Quarters being Egg Quarter, and the Tails vs Eggman 2 entry being missing. And most of the mission entries for the stages in the final game are left over, having 1 or 2 differences like certain time limits. The English text is written with a different font in this version, being Impress, which was used in SA1. In the final game, only the Japanese text uses this font, as the Western release uses Comic Sans. Comic Sans is present in the demo but goes unused. Aside from the font difference, the pause menu also has a slightly different design, featuring a much lighter border and lacking the text to denote which player paused the game. The style used for that section of the menu is also different. The light shoes are fully functional, although they can usually only be seen in the gameplay demo. Like his regular shoes, they have a different design from the final. The Flame Ring Somersault has a simpler effect in this version, lacking the fire in front of Sonic and a different texture for the fire trail. When Sonic pulls off a nice trick, he does a front flip as opposed to a regular turn of the board as seen in the final. And when he pulls off an awesome trick, he essentially does a version of the final cool trick that includes more turns, being eventually changed to a rotating high-speed turning kick. The best item you can get from a checkpoint here is a regular shield, not a magnetic one. This means you can actually have a magnetic shield get replaced with a regular one in this stage, which is not possible in the final. As for stage differences, the mission for City Escape is different, being find a goal ring instead of escape from the military pursuit. This platform and capsule have a different positioning. The small area where Sonic obtains the magic hands is completely different, having a different crate layout and camera angle. It also lacks the enemies and the upgrade itself. And when Sonic is being chased by the gun truck, if you jump off of the first ramp of this segment, you'll get a 20 ring capsule which was removed in the final. Also, if you try to access any other stage, you'll be presented with a placeholder title card displaying the name of the stage, but nothing will happen. As for audio differences, 8 tracks are present here, containing a wealth of differences compared to the final ones. The song used for the title screen has a different ending and a quieter lead guitar. The main track for City Escape starts off differently and doesn't include vocals yet. It's of note that one specific section of the instrumental is only present in the demo version, which ended up being used and remixed in Sonic Generations as the solo guitar for the classic version of the stage. The song for the truck chase sounds mostly identical, although was slightly rearranged. The Invisibility song loops its drums after each section, whereas in the final some extra drums are subsequently added. This is easier to notice if you overlap both songs. The speed-up theme sounds almost identical to SA1's, with the instruments being slightly changed to feel more unique in the final. Weirdly, after clearing City Escape, the coming 2001 screen is shown, having a voice clip to accompany it that is only present in this build. Yes, it was removed not only in the final, but from every prototype that comes after this one.
Coming 2001.
The whistle that Sonic makes, as well as the sound an animal makes when you get it, are wrongly played at a lower sample rate and are significantly shorter in length, being higher in pitch as a result. There is a small click noise when Sonic gets on a rail that doesn't exist in the final. And when the player's performance grade hits the screen, it makes the emblem jingle as opposed to the metallic thud sound in the final.
Just made it. That was tight!
Lastly, let's take a look at the debug modes. The debug functions available in this build are part of a much more extensive debug menu from the May 7 prototype I'll be covering further in the video. While not every function is present in this build, it does have more than the final game. Firstly, you can use a camera editor, where you can view and edit any camera in the stage or create new ones. This editor features two menus. The first one is the main editor, which can add, edit, remove and generate data about cameras in the current stage. Inside the main editor are 9 sub-menus which affect a different property of the camera. The first is base, which has several options. Mode is the type of camera being placed. Some are pretty obvious to deduce by the name, but others, like Knuckles, which is misspelled, Ashland, Carmel and Gaku Gaku may be a bit more difficult. These are all used at one point or another in the game though. Level is unknown, call is the shape of the camera trigger, being sphere, plane or cube, so the type of camera collision, and adjust and entry are also unknown. Adjust specifically has several sub-options which don't seem to do anything. The 8 other menus are more related to the position, rotation and scale of the camera. The other integer options have an unknown purpose though. All of them show a list of 7 integers and adjustable floats which don't seem to have any noticeable effects. And the second one is the point editor, which can be used to place different markers that seem to be related to the camera pathing. By connecting a second controller, you can also unlock a few more options. You can disable camera collision, which will make the camera move through geometry, show the properties of any active cameras, or make the camera triggers visible during normal play. Secondly, you can access the event test, which lets you watch any cutscene you want as well as pause it, reverse it, or play it at a different speed. However, since most assets for them are missing, this doesn't work as intended. Thirdly, you can access a free movement mode, which lets you fly around with the character as you wish. And lastly, you can access the sound test using the fourth controller, which will open a menu that can play any currently loaded sound effects. There are also a few debug functions exclusive to this demo, such as the first line of dialogue from the intro cutscene playing when you enter the debug mode, 現在領域は首都上空を南下中。機体ポロとも異常なし。 and being able to access a board by pressing the Y button on the second controller. While this is present in the final and is enabled by default, it only works in Metal Harbor. And that's about it for the trial. Now let's take a look at the preview build. Sonic Adventure 2 Preview is a demo of SA2 that was sent to the press in order to gain publicity for the game. The demo includes a level for each character, as well as multiplayer levels for each type of gameplay. It was built on the 18th of March of 2001 and dumped by DRX on the 31st of August of 2008. The title screen is very close to the one used in the final game. Under the game's logo is a preview subtitle, also having a glow effect behind the logo not present in the final, and the text in the bottom left corner being slightly different. Similar to how Sonic Adventure has an unused beta version title screen, this prototype has an alternate Alpha Plus version that was presumably used for earlier builds of the game. There are no icons displayed on the VMU. The font used for the English text is still Impress. The posters in Cifesk use the same textures as the final, except for the Chow in Space and Pizza posters, which are still identical to the trial. And the walls that can be dug into to access different areas in the treasure hunting stages have a different center. As for gameplay differences, every character has their first upgrade available from the very start. The bounce bracelet has buggy collision with objects, such as clipping through steel containers without a flame ring equipped. Mystic Melody is called Ancient Melody. There is no special cutscene for obtaining an upgrade, as you can still move around with the text on screen. The rocket on the rocket platforms is too high and can be seen even when the platform is inactive. While every mission is in the game, the fifth mission, which is always hard mode, has no specific layout. And this prototype has 4 unique demos that are only present here, being absent in every beta and the final, despite also having unique leftover demos. The first is for Pumpkin Hill. It only contains one specific demo camera, which is the one right at the start. It can desync if you haven't obtained the Shovel Claw. However, it will always desync here because Knuckles will miss the jump, even though he's able to grab this pumpkin for some reason. The second is for Skyrail. It has a lot and weird amount of complex camera work done for a demo that can never be seen normally. Even so, it doesn't last very long, as Shadow will miss a homing attack and fall off the stage. The third is for Iron Gate. While this demo is pretty much identical to the one left over in SA2 Battle, it has one big difference, which is the fact that Eggman smacks himself into this gate here. This likely suggests this door didn't exist when the demo was made. And the last one is for Weapons Beds. This one desyncs right at the start, as it's pretty obvious none of these objects were present at the start of the level when the demo was recorded, since Eggman just walks right into the wall and isn't able to go around it. Well, he's able to go around it, but then he smacks himself into another wall. As for stage differences, life boxes do not appear at the lost Chow locations, though the Chow itself will spawn if the correct mission is loaded. After completing any level, the game will send you back to the title screen. The only exception to this is City Escape, which will weirdly send you to Green Forest. The path to where Sonic can get the Ancient Light exists, though the area itself is completely empty. The indoor section of Wild Canyon has incorrect lighting. Most digging walls have been removed, with the only exception to this being the one behind the steel containers in Dry Lagoon. The hint monitors will also display blank text boxes in this stage. Similarly, the rooms accessed by digging the walls in Wild Canyon are completely empty. The objects for these rooms are actually floating out of bounds near the start of the stage, which can be seen in the final by going out of bounds in the 2-player version of the level. And, as you would expect, there are a ton of small object layout differences between these levels and the final ones, namely regarding different enemy positioning, some objects either being present in this version and removed in the final, or absent in this beta and added in the final, or sometimes a small redesign of some sections of the levels. Also, unlike the final, loading a stage that doesn't exist will spawn you in a void instead of crashing. Each character, except for Tails, has a small cutscene play before they start their levels. However, the scenes in this build differ in many small ways from the final. The first Sonic cutscene is identical to the trial. Each cutscene uses the wrong voice clips, as the English voice tracks haven't been implemented yet.
What was that all about?
I did that to prevent the Master Emerald from being stolen, you idiot. If it's in pieces, I can restore it. And by the way, that's not your emerald.
Into it once I get back to the base.
Sigma Alpha 2 heading due south over the city. We're en route. Everything's a go.
I despise...
The flashback scenes and everything before them in Shadow's Radical Highway is missing. While Knuckles' upgrades can't be seen in-game normally, his sunglasses have a different cutscene model, seen in an unused cutscene file in the final game. He also sports his hammer gloves, which were probably removed in the final events due to taking too much space. On the same note, despite the English dub being completed at the time of this build's creation, the English subtitle lines found in one specific file seem to use a much earlier draft of the localization, with many lines, particularly the ones for the Sonic and Shadow confrontation scenes, having overly literal and unusual sentences. Most of these appear to be from the Dark Story. The intro subtitles appear to be much more descriptive in the final, with some punctuation also being different due to not making much sense. Punctuation was also changed for when Eggman meets Shadow. The first encounter between Knuckles and Rouge also only has punctuation changes. Despite the cutscene before Radical Highway only including the last 12 seconds of the final version, the entire dialogue is actually present here, though with, you guessed it, only punctuation changes. Sonic and Shadow's first confrontation was completely changed in the final game, as most lines are either different or missing. Even so, the first and last lines of the final subtitles go unused. In their first battle, only Sonic's last line is the same. Other than that, it's completely different with over-literal phrases, like Sonic calling Shadow a poser. While the dialogue after the battle is different, the meaning is the same. Most of the dialogue for Sonic's quote-unquote death is different. Note that the line where Tails says "It's not fair, Eggman" is used in the final and even has an unused voice clip for it. And lastly, besides most of the dialogue in the cutscene before the second Sonic vs Shadow fight being completely different, it's also much shorter. Now let's take a look at some early and unused audio. Nearly all of the tracks present in this build, besides being at a lower frequency, have some pretty noticeable differences compared to their final counterparts. Take a listen. Many sound effects are different compared to the final game, including the climbing sound for Knuckles and Rouge, as well as the lock-on laser for Tails and Eggman. Every character speaks in a combination of their English and Japanese voice clips. For example, while the jumping lines are in Japanese, the other lines are in English.
Shall we get going?
There are several entries for songs that are listed in the game files but are absent from the builds, most notably Chow songs. A song called Chow Ji Yede was used in battle for the Chow goodbye music. However, Yede translates to runaway, which probably has to do with a scrapped mechanic where Chow would run away from a garden on their own if certain conditions were met, as well as songs called Chow G Carnival D, Carnival H and Carnival N, all of which are absent in every build and are only referenced here, so their purpose is completely unknown. Much like Sonic Adventure's auto demo, there are some Japanese voice leftovers here that are removed entirely in the final and don't have any English equivalents. Though some of these are absent in the final, all of their subtitles are present there. There is a line for Sonic saying he doesn't really care that much after Eggman asks Sonic to hand over the fake emerald if he values Amy's life, which is really fucking weird.
別にそれほどでもないけどな。
Eggman would then say,
生意気なハリネズミめ。だがこれでもまだ意地を張っていられるかな
which implies that he would have, or at least attempted to, hurt Amy. In the same cutscene, Tails would say this.
Flick!
It's anyone's guess when he would say this. This following Eggman line was meant to play after the Unused line where Tails says that what Eggman's doing isn't fair.
目的のためなら手段を選ばぬ。それがわしのポリシーじゃ
While this voice clip is absent in the final, its subtitle is loaded but just never plays. And here are Sonic and Shadow screaming. These are actually supposed to be the roars that the Bile-Lizard makes after Knuckles finishes his chant to stop the Chaos Emeralds, but since they're heavily filtered in the final game, you can't make them out. There are voice quotes of the default menu voice that can be found in the files, sounding completely different compared to the final. They are most likely meant to be placeholders and were replaced for obvious reasons. Curiously, the lesson option you'll hear in just a moment is the only voice clip removed in the final.
Story select, scene select, character select, stage select, type select, records, group select, game select, lessons, options, sound test, access to the world, file select, system alert, congratulations, world ranking, emblem records, kart racing, download events, theme select, TV setting, access to the database. Please wait.
This unfiltered English Omo Chow line found its way into both the English and Japanese voice archives. Why and how, it's anyone's guess.
Press A button and use L or R triggers while grinding to jump from rail to rail.
To top it all off, the control scheme he explains isn't possible in the final game nor in any early builds, as to use the grind step you need to press the jump button and aim the control stick to the direction you want to switch. Even so, this mechanic would only be implemented in 2008 with Sonic Unleashed, despite also being suggested via unused voice clips in Heroes and 06 weirdly. And near the end of Metal Harbor, I'm sure you know about a section with a missile launch and a voiced announcement. In the final game, the announcement is always in English regardless of what language is chosen, but at some point it was also supposed to have a Japanese equivalent.
ミサイル発射15秒前 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire.
And lastly for this prototype, let's take a look at the debug modes. There's not much that's new here, as most of the debug functions present are the same as the trial. Even so, the background for the debug menu is either different or completely fucked, even though it works as normal. Event test is fully functional however, and even displays numerous statistics unlike the final game, which has everything hidden for some reason. And that's about it for the preview builds. Now let's take a look at the trial version. Sonic Adventure 2 trial version, or shop trial, not to be confused with the trial prototype I covered earlier, was a build of the game that was given to certain stores in Japan. It was built less than a month before release, on the 3rd of May of 2001, and dumped by Orange Fox on the 12th of July 2016. Due to the build height of this version, there are fewer differences in this build compared to the previous demos, but there are a lot of specific changes made for this demo only. Even so, the differences that are present give some useful insight into the last month of the game's development. The title screen has text in the bottom left corner indicating that it is indeed a trial version, along with slightly different text below it. The logo displayed on the VMU is different compared to the one used in the final version. The Chow in Space poster in City Escape is the only one that's still different here, still saying coming on DVD. All of Sonic and Shadow's upgrades have been replaced with life boxes. As in the previous demos, the area where Sonic obtains the magic hands is a lot different different compared to the final game, including a wooden crate that wasn't present here before. The trail of rings leading to the area with the flame ring in Radical Highway is missing. The rocket in that area has already been activated, unlike other versions where you must break a steel container first. Trying to enter Green Forest or Sand Ocean will make the character spawn in the wrong location with no music playing, as well as the camera being frozen and there being a timer on top saying flame that rapidly changes. Dying will spawn you normally, but there will still be no music. Due to this odd starting position, you will actually spawn in quicksand and die immediately in Sand Ocean. And the area with a third collapsing pillar in Sand Ocean is similar to the layout seen in the preview builds, but it has 3 single springs instead of a large one. On track 1 of the trial version's disc is a wallpaper unique to this version of the game. And that's about it for this build. Now let's take a look at the infamous May 7 prototype. This, along with a review build, which will be covered next, are the only full prototypes of the game we have access to at the time of this video. Additionally, it's the only build that contains the full debug mode working as intended. As its name suggests, it was built on the 7th of May of 2001, 3 weeks before release, and dumped on the 30th of December 2020 by DRX, showing a wealth of differences compared to the final. Firstly, the title screen appears to be identical to the final version. The main menu, however, has several differences. First of all, it has no description text for the options you're hovering over. The homepage button uses a unique graphic when it detects that no internet connection is available, instead of being simply faded out. Omochau's tutorial is heavily incomplete. The menu has bright specular lighting enabled, which gives the tutorial images a bright tint, and the Chow tutorial is mostly unimplemented. While Omochau still says his first line and displays the first image of the tutorial, the rest of the dialogue for this sequence is missing, so the game defaults to the Japanese error messages. All assets required for this tutorial to function normally are in the files but don't get used. Returning to the main menu after this error occurs may corrupt the background temporarily. The options menu has a few differences. Firstly, it has no header graphic, every character theme is unlocked, using a character's theme doesn't add artwork of them to the background, the jump pack menu is accessible even if there's no jump pack in the controller, unlocking tracks for the sound test is still a work in progress, as the themes for the 6 main characters aren't unlocked by default, and none of the jingles such as speed up, invisibility or timer can be unlocked. Collecting 180 emblems does not unlock Green Hill in this build, even though it does exist in the disc at this point. The world ranking system hasn't been removed in this version yet, even though the menu to enter it is still disabled. The menu is similar to the emblem results and has been left in an unfinished state. Ranking data, which is generated randomly on entry, is shown for each unlocked state in 4 categories, being time attack, score attack, total ranking, and emblem. Pressing the Y button gives the option to connect to the internet if there's network registration data in the Dreamcast internal memory, or an error screen if there isn't. Trying to connect will print an error message and softlock the game, since there's obviously no server to connect to. How much of the menu is functional past this point is unknown. Chow cocoons behave weirdly in this prototype compared to the final game, as player characters can still interact with Chow and pick them up. The cocoons also don't have a fade out transition, they simply vanish. The force of the cocoon trying to set itself on the ground causes the character to moonwalk infinitely until it finally disappears. It can also push you out of bounds. The hero story intro has different lighting compared to the final game. The scene where Amy rescues Sonic from Prison Island has darker lighting and an odd blue tint that was removed in the final. And the view of the planet in the credit sequence is at a different angle. The glow was also adjusted for the final as it looks more blocky in this build. On the topic of differences, there are so many minor differences in object layouts like you wouldn't believe. Since that's probably the case, I'll be covering all of them, or most at least. Most of these layouts appear to have been repurposed for hard modes, as a ton of similarities are present between this beta and the final's 5th missions. Starting by general differences, animals dropped from enemies don't have bubbles surrounding them and are collected instantly when defeated by using the homing attack. Pumpkin Hill and Egg Quarters don't force one of the emerald shards to require digging. This was changed since it would be possible to skip collecting the digging upgrades and softlock the save file. In the route levels, the cars aren't knocked away if the player bumps into one. As for City Escape, the fucking Chow in Space poster still has the early text, and the Magic Hands area is also still different. And one fence is missing on the stairs near the first Chow box in the hard modes. As for Metal Harbor, the line of enemies to get to the first Chow box is different. However, the layout used in the final version is used in this build for the hard modes. The first area with beetle robots only has 1 instead of 2. The line of invisible beetles to get an extra life on the aircraft carrier is missing. One of the background missiles near the second loop was moved to the right. The camera at the last checkpoint is different. Also, the pickable object next to the last Chow box was exchanged for an animal and moved. And both voices for the missile launch overlap overlap each other, causing the scene to desync. In the final, a delay was added so the countdown was properly timed with the launch.
The missile is about to be fired. Grab hold of the hammer and you should be able to make it. Hurry, there's no time left.
3, 2, 1. Fire. Missile launch in 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fire.
As for Aquatic Mine, there is a pulley above the air necklace that Knuckles can grab and be pulled into the upgrade spot. He'll also get impaled by it during the cutscene. Also, a scrapped position for an emerald shard can be found here, next to the 3rd level drain switch. As for Pyramid Cave, the first Tomo Chow is not floating in midair like the final game, which makes it even weirder why it is floating in the final. The hourglass after the bounce bracelet's location is on the right rather than centered. The location of the enemy next to the hourglass at the 2nd key area was moved from behind to in front of it. The spot where the 2nd door key is found is completely different. There is a small puzzle with a trap that can only be deactivated by touching a switch inside a container openable with a bound jump. In the final, this spot is a sort of grab and run area with 2 E1000 robots instead. And there's no hourglass to leave the Lost Chow room, leaving you completely stuck. Hard mode also contains several differences. The E1000 in front of the door to the 1st key room is the flying variant, being unchanged in the final. There is a spring behind him that was removed, leaving just the wooden boxes. The ghosts in the room before the green key slot are the normal variant instead of the larger one. An E1000 on the path to the green key stationary rather than flying. There is a floating wooden container here as well. This extra life was replaced with a ring box in the final. The beta has basically no ghosts in this area. The Mystic Melody statue to get to the Lost Chow is still present, and the Lost Chow room in the final adds the same hourglass to leave the room as normal mode, despite removing the statue needed to get there. As for Final Rush, this area was massively changed in the final, having a pulley and a rail that lead to a spring rather than just a rail that leads to the next platform. The camera angle for a vertical rail shortly afterwards was changed. This platform only has 1 guard instead of 3. This camera angle is also different for some reason. There are 2 rails in the upper part of the climbing section instead of 1 diagonal rail. Speaking of rails, there are 2 rails missing here, and the middle rail isn't present yet in the Lost Chow route, making it harder. The rooms where you have to choose one of 3 paths initially had rails on the walls, probably removed because you could grind upside down on them. Hard mode also has a few differences. The artificial chaos on the 2 rails before the first checkpoint is slightly earlier, making avoiding it much harder as you can't jump on the ground. The large spiral rail is missing all but 1 artificial chaos, also having a positioning not seen from any used enemy. This laser hawk was slightly moved, and both Mystic Melody statues are present, being replaced with extra lives in the final. As for Green Hill, it appears to be basically final except for some oddities, such as the trigger zone for the S-tubes being visible in normal gameplay. And lastly for Sky Rail, there are no rings on the rail at the beginning. There is no ring next to the Condor obtainable by bouncing high enough on the first triple spring. The containers near the Mystic Melody statue have a different arrangement, as well as the ring path being a choppier curve. An entirely different camera angle is used when using the light dash on those rings. One of the gun hogs in the Lost Chow area is much closer to the platform the player uses to reach the mountain summit, potentially getting in the way and damaging them while trying to use the platform. Most ring boxes are either missing or giving different amounts. In this area, the camera stays behind shadow and doesn't focus the gold beetle, and these 2 robots near the end of the level are different. And lastly for this prototype, let's take a look at its main attraction, the debug mode. While this build may have been too late into development to have many significant differences from the final, it makes up for it in the sheer amount of debug functions left in it. Up until its release, only the trial and preview offered truncated versions of these functions, as well as only being usable in a small number of stages. But this one is not only the full game with said debug modes, but also has several additional features not seen anywhere else. Trying to load into a stage that doesn't have a title card, such as bosses, while having the debug mode active will say no name before it loads. Also, if you load Cannon Score from the level select with it, completing any section will return you to the world map for some reason. Now for actual features, firstly you can activate free movement mode, which lets you fly play around as you wish, an object editor, being exclusive to this build, can be found. It is mostly identical to the one seen in the preview build of Sonic Adventure DX, however the multi-mode is hard-coded to be skipped. With this, you can view any object in the stage and properties related to them, as well as place new ones and edit those that already exist. While the editor is open, every hidden object becomes visible. While the said multi-mode is normally inaccessible, there are two that aren't, being Place and System. The first lets you grab an object and place it, while System lets you access common objects for every character or character-specific objects, such as emeralds for Knuckles and Rouge. You might have noticed that I said the multi-mode is quote-unquote normally inaccessible, and that's because you can actually change a memory value in the game to make it accessible. It's not that interesting really, it just changes the number of objects held, but it's a neat feature I guess. The camera editor and sound test, which I've covered before, are also present here. I won't be covering them as they work identically to the trial and preview. Though the event test would also apply to the previous criteria, it actually has a bunch of new features not present in those prototypes. The most evident would be that you can actually access every single cutscene as this is a full build. The less evident would be the new editing modes present for these cutscenes. The first is the debug camera mode. New cameras called by the cutscene while this is active are ignored, so you're actually able to see some otherwise obscure details such as models teleporting between shots. The second is the sprite viewer, which lets you view the textures loaded within the current event. The third is fog edit mode, which doesn't seem to affect anything. The fourth is change, which prints the word change on screen for a split second and doesn't do anything besides that, which is really fucking weird. And lastly is the coordinates display, featuring multiple variables and an XYZ coordinate object. Changing the position variables will reposition the cursor however, while changing the other selected variables won't have any effect. There are a few displays that can be activated via the pause menu. Pressing the D-pad to the right lets you view the game frame by frame, depending on if you just tap it once or a few times or if you keep holding it. Pressing the X button shows a display of the game's performance, showing how much stuff is loaded at that specific point. In the center of the screen is a list of tasks executed in the current stage with the location of their main code in the game's memory, as well as how many instances of the task are currently active. You can also scroll this up and down or press D-pad right to view more info about each task, such as its name. Pressing B lets you access the collision renderer, which makes all hitboxes visible. Colliding with any of them displays a message with the type of collision and the line showing the box you're touching. The range of objects that can be picked up, such as Omo Chow, is also visible, and pressing the Y button changes land block. In other words, it decreases the max draw distance for the level, which is usually off in single player but on for two-player modes. A menu system that was used to test the BioLizard's attacks, as well as final hazards, can be accessed by pressing the left D-pad in their fight while paused. When one of the menus is active, the boss stops its normal AI and begins acting according to the purpose of the menu, such as testing a specific attack. Damaging the BioLizard causes it to resume its regular AI until the menu is changed again. One of these menus is Energy Mode, which makes the BioLizard spit its dark spheres at the player. You can change the delay between attacks, as well as the starting speed of the spheres and their acceleration. Another is Energy Disp, which spawns a single stationary sphere in a fixed location. Touching it does nothing, so it seems it's just a test for the sphere's visuals. Motion Disp makes the BioLizard cycle through all of its animations, with the name of the animation being displayed on screen. Ikura Mode and Ikura Wind are menus related to the floating bubble attacks. It lets you change the number of bubbles to spawn, up to 128 of them, the chance each has to spawn at the outer or inner rings, and the speed that the bubbles fly towards the player. Gliding Mode forces the action where the BioLizard's body becomes grindable, and Defend Disp spawns one instance of the shockwave that appears when bouncing off of the BioLizard's body above the character's head. As for the final hazard, Debug causes the boss's AI to stop functioning. It also freezes the ring counter and lets you attack the boss as normal. However, it won't resume the boss's normal AI, and thus the fight won't end if its health is completely depleted. Ikura Mode does the exact same thing as the BioLizard, except here you adjust the number of spheres for high, mid and low HP. Cannon Mode adjusts the speed of the moving beam attacks. Weak Mode spawns every possible swelling on the boss's body. However, attacking them does nothing, and the character only locks on to the correct swelling. And all this spawns 2 moving beams. And lastly, for this prototype, it features a unique and exclusive Chow World editor with a bunch of options to mess around with. It's activated via the third controller and can manipulate almost anything, from the Chow itself to unlocking certain flags, and a free camera that was once intended to be featured in the final Chow Garden. Parameter displays all stats for a selected Chow, including hidden behaviors such as its sleepiness and personality sliders. Like shows its bond with the player, Shape lets you manipulate the Chow Chow's gradual evolution sliders, such as its shape, type and alignment. Group can instantly change the Chow's main evolution type. Buyo lets you move the Chow around. Move does the same thing except slower, making precise movement easier. Motion shows a list of all Chow animations and lets you apply them to a Chow. Motion check is the same but lets you play the animation in the editor instead of waiting for you to exit it. Parts, obake, eye text, eye ang and mouth text let you change multiple aspects of the Chow's appearance, such as adding animal parts, heads, changing its body, eye and mouth texture, or the angle of the eyes, which can result in some pretty unsettling imagery. SC, voice, music and stage SC are pretty self-explanatory, I think. However, music actually plays songs from the Chow kindergarten, not from the entire Chow world. C-switch lets you disable parts of the Chow's AI, such as animations, moving and certain behaviors seen in the parameter editor. W-switch displays information about the current garden, namely the objects currently populating the garden, as well as show the range that certain actions can be performed to a Chow. Garden flag lets you enable certain garden-related flags, but not disable them weirdly. It basically lets you gain access to other areas, such as the hero and dark gardens. Race flag lets you unlock different types of Chow to race against. S toy flag lets you select which race prizes the select Chow owns. Art flag affects the Chow's drawing skill, where you can change its level from 1 to 5. Same goes for song flag, but this time it's related to its singing skill. Dance flag allows you to select which dances from the kindergarten a Chow has learned, while music flag is related to which instruments it can play. Toy flag lets you select which garden prizes from the races appear in the Chow garden, and free cam is exactly that, a camera that lets you fly around as you wish. The Chow races also feature some exclusive options. Race path disp shows the path a Chow will take during a race. Race cam disp shows every camera used in a race as well as their triggers and target positions. And lastly, race cam edit is an editor for the cameras, and it functions as you probably think it does, nothing much to it. And that's about it for the May 7 prototype. So lastly, for the Dreamcast prototypes, let's quickly take a look at the review build. It's a version of the game sent to the press about a week before the final build was completed. At this point, the game has been mostly finalized, although there are still some differences left, most of which being last minute. It was built on the 21st of May 2001 and dumped by DRX on the 17th of March 2019. The Chow in Space poster has been finalized finally. The congratulations graphic is higher in resolution for some reason. The hints for the second Tails vs Eggman fight are slightly different, with one piece of text being duplicated for whatever reason. Similarly, the hints for the second Sonic vs Shadow fight are very different, as it doesn't tell the player how to dodge the opponent's attacks. And while I won't be covering this, there are very minor object and camera layout differences for basically every single level, even more unimportant than May 7th's, so it makes even less sense to talk about it. So that's about it for Dreamcast prototypes. Now let's take a look at the only prototype for SA2 Battle, the interactive multi-game demo disc demo. There are few, if any, differences to the final game in terms of gameplay. However, it reuses the menu system from a TGS demo I covered in the previous video, giving some insight into how that demo worked and what it contained. Firstly, the title screen is based on an earlier version. It fades in without any flash or logo movement, lacking the transitions from the final game. The demo cycle was removed, just staying on the title screen after the music fades out. It uses the preview subtitle from the TGS demo, but has the final capitalized press start graphic and copyright text, as well as the English logo. While the background is almost the same as the finals, it has one big difference. The floating orbs are still part of the background itself instead of their own separate particle effects. Their positioning is strangely different compared to the TGS backgrounds. Pressing start opens a menu asking the player if they want a single or multiplayer game. The graphics for these buttons are left over in the final game, although in Japanese. The one-player option brings you to a stripped-down version of the two-player battle menu. Selecting a character starts one of their stages, being City Escape for Sonic, Radical Highway for Shadow, Route 101 for Tails, Iron Gate for Eggman, Wild Canyon for Knuckles, and Dry Lagoon for Rouge. The two-player menu is the same as the final version in a new game, other than missing the stage select screen. Just like the single-player menu, each type gets one stage, being City Escape for the action race, Hidden Base for shooting, and Dry Lagoon for the treasure hunt. After completing, leaving a stage or playing for 10 minutes, this screen is shown to the player, being a unique image not seen in any build of the game, used or otherwise. And an action replay code lets you access a debug mode that displays debug info on the bottom portion of the screen, identical to the one left over in the final game. And that's about it for prototypes. Now let's take a look at some trailers. The trailers we'll be taking a look at are, for the Dreamcast version, the E3 2000 trailer, the trial commercial, the focus tests, trailers 3 and 4, and the Dark Story preview. While for Battle, we'll be taking a look at the Space World 2001 trailer and the Tokyo Games Show 2001 trailer. So, starting by the Dreamcast E3 2000 trailer, Sonic is wearing his normal shoes instead of the soap shoes. Even so, the model for them is different from early screenshots, which we'll take a look at in a bit. And the trial. Sonic's running animation is slightly different, appearing to have more frames and looking smoother as a result. The entirety of City Escape doesn't exist here, only a long path that isn't present in the final at all. Its skybox is very simplistic, being just a blue gradient which end can actually be seen at certain points in the video. Some of the textures used here can actually be found in the final game, namely in the texture archive for the removed Sonic test level, being removed from every single build and version of the game. The design for the gun truck is also different. In Green Forest, there are 2 robots present that aren't in this specific area in the final game, although they are present in the preview builds. A lot of complex camera work can also be seen, although it's most likely only intended for trailer purposes. Some areas of this level seem quite different too. And as for Skyrail, Sonic is there, which is something I think you can tell never happens in the final game. Besides that, the level is clearly very early into development, as it has its fog missing and most objects and areas of the level lack animations. As for the trial commercial, the lighting in the hero story intro is much darker, Sonic's running animation is still much smoother, though weirdly smoother than what's actually seen in the trial, and the demo tape version of Escape from the City plays, which prior to November 2020 was its only known use. You might be wondering what I mean by this. Well, we'll be taking a look at these demo tapes right after the trailers, so bear with me for a few minutes. As for the focus test, this is footage of an unknown build that was made between the trial and the preview build, so between November 2000 and April 2001. Bearing the focus test version text below the logo, the title screen has already reached its final design at this point. Sonic is still wearing his classic shoes. White Jungle's music sounds different, using much rougher instrumentation although still having the same feel.
ちなみに発売日はソニックの誕生日6月23日に決定。
The stage also doesn't have the 10-minute timer, suggesting that either the time limit simply hasn't been implemented yet, or the idea for the level was different, and the Phantasy Star Online ad has already been replaced with the Chow in Space 2 ad at this point, while the pixel noise is still used instead of the soap shoes advertisement. As for trailer 3, Sonic is still wearing his normal shoes, the cameras shown in Iron Gate can also be found in the final, and when Sonic meets Shadow, the lighting is very different. As for trailer 4, Sonic is finally wearing the soap shoes, Rouge, Tails and Eggman are also finally shown, and Tails is using the Tornado 2 from SA1 in one cutscene. The water also isn't animated yet. And lastly, for the Dreamcast trailers with the Dark Story preview, the lighting for the cutscene where Eggman awakens Shadow is different, as there is a yellow tint on Eggman that is absent in the final, and the lighting on Shadow is much darker, and the lighting on the emeralds Rouge is holding looks very different too. As for battle trailers, starting by the Space World 2001 trailer, there is no battle subtitle at this point. A lot of Pyramid Cave's background objects haven't been implemented yet, instead showing up as rings. The B button prompt appears to still use the Dreamcast graphic, Sonic is still using his Dreamcast model, and the starting camera for Green Forest doesn't seem to be implemented yet, as it shows the ramp that Sonic flies off of, instead of showing him flying in the air and landing like in the final. And lastly, with the TGS 2001 trailer, Pyramid Cave's sky is black for some reason. The title screen is shown in English but the text is in Japanese. It's possible that the Japanese title screen hadn't been created yet. Trees in City Escape suffer from transparency issues, and some parts of Final Rush glitch out the lighting or fail to load. Now let's take a look at some promotional material. Remember when I said we were gonna look at some demo tapes after the trailers? Well, here we are. In December 2020, 4 early tracks from Sonic Adventure 2 were released by the Sonic the Hedgehog social media account itself, for the Extra Life charity after a stretch goal of $6,000 was met. All of them likely date before November 2000, not only due to how early they sound, but because the finalized instrumental for City Escape is used in the trial. So take a listen. As for promotional screenshots, SA2 was officially announced at the first day of E3 2000, alongside a set of screenshots in the trailer I've already covered being shown behind closed doors. As such, the screenshots shown have also found their way into the internet for everyone to see, featuring higher quality versions of not only the trailer but other game features not shown there. Here is Sonic running from the gun truck. As I've said before, the truck model would eventually be completely redesigned in the final game, with prominent gun lettering on display, just looking like a regular truck here. These Cifesk screenshots let us take a better look at those test textures that are never seen anywhere else. While they look close to what is seen in the final game, a lot of the house and shop textures are unique to this version. Here is Sonic running through green forest with his original shoes. A screenshot of Knuckles swimming in aquatic mine showcases the early lighting scheme, with the water overlay also being much bluer than the final. Here is Sonic standing in Skyrail, which never happens in the final and also showcases the unfinished lighting model. This is the first ever shot of the new Chow Garden. It's noticeable that the top half of the palm tree logs is very dark for some reason. The water also looks very different here. Most of the other screenshots shown just feature different lighting, namely a prominent blue fog in Iron Gate. For 10 days, starting on the 22nd of September 2000, screenshots of the game were released on Sonic Team's website. 2 of them were released a day, totaling 20 screenshots. Day 1 showcases some shots of the first in-game hero cutscene. Day 2 displays Sonic's early Lightspeed shoes upgrade, which looks very different from the one used along the soap shoes, which are also missing here. Day 3 showcases the new grinding mechanic. Day 4 shows Green Forest. Day 5 showcases Knuckles in Pumpkin Hill. Day 6 also showcases Knuckles, but this time in Aquatic Mine, still using the early lighting. Day 7 reveals Eggman in the cutscene where he awakens Shadow and his Iron Gate level. Day 8 showcases more Iron Gate. Day 9 would be the first time that the new Chow Garden was officially showcased to the public, also revealing the Chow Doctor's room. And lastly, Day 10 finally reveals Shadow. There are a lot of other promotional screenshots released, although most of them are not that interesting. Even so, a small number are, such as this one, that showcases an unknown area in Metal Harbor. This game was also featured a few times at the Electronic Gaming Monthly magazine, which gave us probably one of the best Sonic renders to date. And lastly for this video, let's take a look at some concept art. This game's concept art is better known for Terios, Shadow's original name and design. While Shadow's final design is meant to contrast in every single way with Sonic's design, Terios, which means reflection of, was meant to be exactly that, a reflection of Sonic's design, although playing off that evil rival idea, which explains why his original design looked much more like Sonic than Shadow does. Terios itself went through a lot of iterations, firstly looking just like an evil Sonic, then looking like a mix of Sonic and Knuckles, even featuring a cape, a fringe and a headset at some point. Interestingly, some files used for Shadow in the final game still refer to him as Terios. Rouge also once looked very different, even featuring a piercing on her ear. Her design, or at least appeal, appears to be a mixture of 2 scrapped characters from Sonic Adventure, being Fly the Bat and Spider-Girl, although the latter is still featured in that game in the form of posters around Station Square and Speed Highway. Gerald Robotnik was also supposed to feature a very large beard, but was instead redesigned to look like an old version of Eggman, which makes sense either way. The City Escape intro cutscene was apparently projected to have Sonic fall above the clouds, as in the final he either isn't that high up or the sky is clear. The level could have also featured a bridge section like Radical Highway, which was probably repurposed for that stage. Aquatic Mine's concepts are really weird, as I can tell if everything looks small or absolutely enormous. It would have featured what appears to be some small houses and the aquatic part was just a small pond apparently. Here is a very detailed concept of the elevator in Iron Gate, with another concept showing that the level could have been multi-layered at some point. The Space Colony arc once looked completely different from the one seen in the final game, having its shell broken and some sort of ring going around it. And lastly, here is a development shot of Sonic in some kind of animation program. And that's about it for this video. The third and last part of these videos will probably coming out in a few weeks, so stay tuned for that. If you haven't watched the first part, going over the final game's cut content, I also recommend checking that out. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications, as it does really help me out a ton. You can also support me on Patreon for €1.50 and get some perks, like early access to videos and your name at the end of the screen. I also have a Twitter if you want to follow me there, and check out my community tab once in a while where I post quite frequently with video news. And that's about it really. I'll hopefully see you soon.